Hello, I'm Keith Plough, host of this channel, The People's Pigeon, a channel that aims to give highly detailed reports on people of interest, global events, and criminal organizations. Today, in 2024, an estimated 50 million people worldwide are the victims of slavery, a number tantamount to 14.3% of the population of the United States of America at 335 million, or 73.5% of the United Kingdom's population of 68 million. 1 in 4 of this 50 million are children. The rest are often impoverished and disadvantaged peoples seeking migrant work and opportunities. The most common opportunities they come across are being sold for sex trafficking or being forced into hard labor. Adults traveling abroad in pursuit of overseas work are frequently targeted as potential slaves, being stripped of documentation and incarcerated in private slave prisons worldwide. Although this topic is seldom discussed, it is an increasingly common occurrence in every single human-inhabited region of the world. In some countries, slavery has become all too common. In Afghanistan, the Taliban have taken control of the government and brought suffering and hardship to the lives of each and every woman in the country with the misfortune of being trapped in the dystopian hell that is their homeland. In the ironically named Democratic Republic of the Congo lie the Earth's most plentiful reserves of cobalt. Annually, 70% of the world's supply comes from this one nation. The societies we all live in today rely heavily on this cobalt for everyday goods such as dental implants, lithium-ion batteries, cadmium batteries, and hundreds of other applications. At least 20% of the cobalt mined in the Congo comes from slave labor, although that number is likely a low estimate. Children as young as 4 and adults of all ages can be found working in the mining and processing of cobalt in the Congo. They work to fulfill the never-ending demand of their main purchaser, China, a country with no care for human rights at home and certainly less so for those abroad. The slaves of the Congo work in mines without any gear or supports and die frequently from cave-ins and shaft collapses. Those who don't die in the mines die later of hard metal lung disease, from breathing fine cobalt dust, or simply of exhaustion. The slaves of the Congo can be seen in rain or shine, working without shoes or gloves to make sure every free man, woman, and child around the world has a new smartphone each year. The average life expectancy of enslaved peoples in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is 25 years. Far to the north on the continent of Asia, slavery also thrives in many countries. The countries of the GCC, or Gulf Cooperation Council, comprised of Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, along with non-GCC countries in the region, such as Lebanon, Dubai, and Jordan, all use the kafala system to entice migrant workers to their countries in the hopes to enslave those who accept their offer of work. Migrant workers in these countries listed, more often than not, arrive in their host countries and are immediately stripped of all documents and possessions and imprisoned in slave labor camps, or in the homes of their hosts, as domestic slaves. This practice is extremely common in these majority Muslim countries. It is the way Dubai has built the majority of the buildings they have erected since the 1990s. The Burj Khalifa is nothing more than a memorial to the wonders of modern slavery, commissioned by Dubai's ruling class. Victims of the kafala system often come from Bangladesh, India, the Philippines, and Pakistan. They work 7 days a week, sleep on hard floors, eat very little, die by the thousands, and live to serve their Arab slave masters. Further north on the continent of Asia, China is responsible for enslaving an estimated 5.3 million people. Since 2018, China has begun a holocaust of Uyghur Muslims trapped under Xi Jinping's dictatorship. 25% of the world's cotton is produced by Uyghur and other slaves held captive by China's government. When Chinese children sew together clothing for sale domestically and in the West, it is often slave-produced textiles and materials they do so with. China's slave labor force also produces 50% of the world's polysilicon. Polysilicon is a chemical compound utilized in the production of solar panels, amongst other goods. Slaves in China produce clothing for every major retailer you can think of. It is seriously not even worth listing. Think of a clothing brand, then go look it up. I can sadly guarantee the company that comes to your mind will be guilty of using Chinese slave labor. Slavery can be found in North, South and Central America alike. However, some countries are guiltier than others when it comes to turning a blind eye to these matters. In Brazil and Peru, agricultural slavery runs rampant. While it is not state-sanctioned or quite as large as it is in the Eastern Hemisphere, it is still terrible all the same. Migrant workers are lured to remote farms or factories with promises of work, only to be enslaved in labor camps. Some are debt slaves, who work in remote areas where they have no choice but to accept their employer's accommodations, only to be charged more than they could hope to earn in boarding, food, and tool rentals. This debt bondage is meaningless, however, as the end result is the same for the victims, who are beaten viciously and worked until death or escape. In Mexico, with the relaxing of border security from the United States of America to the north, the cartels who rule the country have begun a multi-billion-dollar human trafficking trade. Impoverished South and Central Americans travel to Mexico in search of coyotes, or guides, to lead them to the border, where they hope to enter the United States of America illegally. Some do just that, but a large portion are taken as slaves. The women, as sex slaves, are sold to American tourists and foreigners on vacation, and the men and some of the women end up as forced drug processors or forced drug mules. Some are even forced to assassinate rival cartel members. North of the border in the United States of America, modern slavery exists as well. Some of it is quote-unquote illegal, and often its victims are the impoverished or homeless, who are brought to remote areas and forced to do agricultural work. Other times, slavery is a product of the government of the United States of America, and perfectly legal. Prisoners in the USA in the states of Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Texas, and Mississippi can be legally used for slave labor. Not only can they be used as slaves, they can be forced into slavery or face prolonged imprisonment. This is not modern slavery per se, but merely a continuation of the slavery that was perpetrated on African peoples who built the USA. Slavery in the USA was supposedly abolished in 1865. Yet immediately following its end, Mississippi began enacting Black Code, laws prohibiting pointless things like vagrancy or congregating, simply to imprison and enslave free Black Americans. Today, the USA stuffs its prisons to capacity with majority Black, Hispanic, and Native American peoples and uses their labor either for pennies or nothing at all. The majority of prisoners are jailed for drug-related charges, something that all races and ethnicities partake in equally, as proven by numerous studies and polls, yet mostly this results in the arrest and incarceration of majority-minority peoples. India accounts for 11 million of the world's 50 million estimated slaves. First on the list of offenders by far, India is a human rights nightmare. The most common flavor of slavery is debt bondage. Although illegal under Articles 21 and 23 of the country's constitution, the practice still persists today and shows no signs of stopping. This is because while anti-child and bonded labor laws exist in the country, they are rarely, if ever, utilized. There are even reports of child slaves running away from their masters, only to be returned by local police. In many cases, even in rare occurrences when slave masters are charged by India's judiciary system, the law sides with the slave masters. India's laws heavily favor business owners and employers, even if their employees aren't of the willing or compensated variety. Today, child labor and adult slavery is the means of production for many internationally sold products from India, like rice, silk, and artisanal brick and tile. Further worsening the issue of slavery in India is the caste system, which by birth status and lineage marks some Indians as undesirables and makes them less of a priority for the country's police and government. Lacking any assistance or representation from India, those on the lower caste and India's impoverished have a bleak future. Systemic change, beginning with the government in power, will need to take place for these 11 million people to have a chance at freedom. Currently, nothing is being done. The only country that has never explicitly criminalized slavery in modern times remains North Korea. North Korean slavery is not a systemic issue. In North Korea, slavery is the system. Beginning when North Korean children enter elementary school, they are assigned quotas by their school teachers. Each teacher's quota is different, and some students with more means may be given higher quotas than others. The quotas are often food-related, something of great importance in the food-unstable nation. and are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to their exploitation. North Korean children work every day they attend school, of which attendance is compulsory, at things like road repairs, collecting firewood in the winter, and most commonly, in agriculture. Feeding the hungry mouths of North Korea is a task that has been placed in tiny hands. Their labor is used in every step, from seeding to weeding. North Korea's children are the workforce responsible for the nation's nourishment. Slavery in North Korea does not end in grade school, however. Adults in the country are forced into mobilizations. This can mean road work, construction, clearing rockfalls or mudslides, and any other work the state demands of them. Mobilized individuals are also required to supply their own materials and tools for the jobs they are assigned. There is no pay, but those who cannot figure out how to make it happen are imprisoned in forced labor camps, so their options are nil. The most common mobilization is agricultural work, and occurs between June and August. North Koreans are forced to leave their homes and travel to farms where they work as slave laborers. During these mobilizations, North Koreans are still expected to attend their regular jobs with any time they may have remaining after their forced labor. Their jobs are often not jobs at all, however, but merely occupations forced upon them in which they are not paid, but instead forced to pay their employers. This is because being without a job and place of employment officially recognized by the government in North Korea is a crime, punishable by forced labor. This has caused a power imbalance that leaves employers at a massive advantage. Most employees in North Korea have never even been to their so-called jobs, as reported by 50 defectors interviewed in 2018 regarding their lives in North Korea. Of the 50, only one had actually been to a place where they were officially employed. The rest were simply employed, then extorted, as what they called 8-3 employees, a term that was coined from Kim Il-sung's August 8, 1984 directive. The only hope to escape slavery in North Korea is to escape North Korea, something that has become nearly impossible since the 2020 pandemic and North Korea's subsequent tightening of its borders. Those caught attempting to do so only end up much worse off, as themselves and their entire families are sent to forced labor camps, where they can remain until death and for generations afterwards. The situation does not seem like it will end anytime soon. Those with the misfortune of being born in North Korea will likely die there, having never lived a single day of freedom. Changes to the Earth's weather patterns and the resulting rise in weather-based natural disasters has begun a new era of hardship for most of the world's disadvantaged and impoverished peoples. In recent years, emerging erratic weather patterns have brought disastrous monsoon seasons to Pakistan. Flooding has demolished hectares of farmland and entire communities across the country. In scenes reminiscent of the Old Testament, millions of Pakistani people have lost their homes and along with them all of their worldly possessions in recent years. With nothing left, these displaced farmers have no identification or collateral with which to secure loans to rebuild their lives. Many turn to sharecropping, which often leads to debt bondage and generational slavery. Landlords offer farmers loans of tools, seeds, farmland, and fertilizer, and in return, the farmer is indebted to the landlord and is only able to sell their crops to the landlords who offer little to their tenants in hopes of trapping them as indebted slaves. In recent years, it is increasingly common for erratic weather to cause crop failure, and when this happens, sharecroppers are forced into slavery in droves. This is the intended outcome set in motion by the landlords of Pakistan. 7 million people live and work as slaves in Pakistan under this system. They are often housed in private prisons close to the crops they are forced to tend, and their imprisonment is often sanctioned by local and tribal leaders, as penance for their debt. Although slavery is illegal on paper in Pakistan, the government rarely intervenes. There is no legislature in the works or programs being started to help the country's slaves. There is no hope for a better life for most of the slaves alive in Pakistan today. Global warming is only getting worse, and as it does, we can only expect to see more and more Pakistanis fall victim to this form of slavery. The question is not what can be done about Pakistan at this point. The question is which nation will follow Pakistan next in its fall into slavery and servitude. Russia is a safe haven for slave traders. Since becoming a dictatorship under Vladimir Putin, certain hand-selected Russian mobsters and crime bosses have been given the green light to operate expansive human trafficking networks in the country. Russia's annual GDP derives 25% of its worth from Russia's black market, or $465 billion. There is no way to discern what percentage of these funds are produced by slave labor. It is estimated that 1.3% of Russia's population of 144 million currently live as slaves. Russian women are exported as sex slaves, and thousands of Uzbeks, Tajiks, and Kyrgyz are imported to Russia for forced labor. At times, Russia's slave masters make the effort to claim their slaves owe them a debt, but in most cases they don't bother. No authorities will come for them if they have the okay from Vladimir Putin or one of Russia's many other corrupt officials to operate with impunity. Not only is nothing done about slavery in Russia, the Russian government actively attacks any of its citizens who speak out against it. Russia's government is known to place whistleblowers on FSB watch lists and fine them for speaking out against the state. Fines which are often exorbitantly high and result in imprisonment for lack of payment. Such was the case with Semyon Simonov, head of Russia's Southern Human Rights Center in Moscow. Simonov was vilified by Russia's corrupt government for bringing to light the abuses and violence experienced by the slaves that live and suffer in Russia, especially those forced to work for preparation of the 2014 Sochi Winter Olympics and 2018 FIFA World Cup. Russia's government is pro-slavery. In a nation with crumbling infrastructure, catastrophic brain drain following their invasion of Ukraine, and growing authoritarian control, it is hard to see hope for a better future in Russia. Those in power in Russia are doing all they can to further the demise of liberty and human rights for Russia's citizens. 2 million people live today as slaves with no help on the way. The current culling of Russia's young men as conscripts forced to fight and die invading Ukraine means that Russia will soon be in need of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands, if not millions of migrant workers. Those who answer the call will almost certainly add to the growing number of slaves in Russia in the coming years. War, death, and slavery are the hallmarks of Vladimir Putin's reign as Russia's dictator. Slavery in Indonesia goes unchecked like it does in so many other countries worldwide. Indonesia is the producer of 59% of the world's palm oil, a product found in shave creams, food products, specialty lubricants, and an endless list of other applications. Impoverished Indonesian children and adults alike are lured to palm oil plantations or proposed plantation sites with the promise of medical care, housing, work, and food, only to be imprisoned, enslaved, violently abused, and starved. In some rare cases, help can be had from the COP, or Center for Orangutan Protection. Lacking government intervention, this noble organization has helped to free Indonesian slaves where possible. However, this still leaves an estimated 1.8 million people as slaves producing palm oil that is purchased knowingly by companies like Gillette, Procter & Gamble, Nestle, General Mills, Unilever, Kellogg's, and Kraft Foods, to name a few of the largest despicable corporations. It is to fulfill these corporations' insatiable greed that has caused the year-over-year increase to the number of slaves in Indonesia. Corporations purchase this slave-produced palm oil with knowledge of exactly how it is produced, and simply refuse to comment when asked about their disgusting practices. They get away with it because some pathetic people just can't live without their Nutella. The world relies heavily on this palm oil, and this has brought Indonesia's government more and more wealth each year. Through their lack of action, Indonesia's government has made it clear that it intends to support the slavery of its people happily, as long as the foreign dollars continue rolling in. Worldwide, as global warming and wealth inequality worsens, opportunities for slavery become more plentiful each day. People seeking opportunity and honest work are being preyed upon to satisfy gluttonous corporations and authoritarian dictatorships who are increasingly harder to differentiate, as their goals and practices continue to align. Since the pandemic of 2020, globally, the rise of slavery is on an accelerated pace. More people fall victim to natural disasters each year. Goods are getting unreasonably expensive, and land is slowly succumbing to the rising sea. Nothing substantial is being done to stop any of this. There are too many fires to put out at once. This video itself fails to cover countries like Eritrea, Mauritania, Nigeria, Kuwait, and all the other countries in the world that all deserve to have their slavery issues brought to the light. Not only that, but I lack the ability to show you these atrocities firsthand. It is unfortunate and sickening to report on this topic without being able to offer any glimmers of hope regarding this terrifyingly dark topic, but it would be disingenuous to do so. I can plainly see slavery gaining popularity as a practice in every country I researched and mentioned. Capitalism and the greed of the wealthy have brought the world to its knees. Slavery is having a global resurgence. If you disagree, first and most importantly, you are a dumb asshole. Secondly, you should take a trip to your local supermarket. They will gladly sell you lithium-ion batteries made with cobalt processed by shoeless 4-year-olds in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, shave cream made with palm oil straight from the slaves of Indonesia, cotton swabs from third-generation slaves in Pakistan, or beautiful tiles and bricks stained with the blood and sweat of one of India's 11 million enslaved peoples. Just because you aren't personally beating and enslaving children doesn't mean you aren't the reason it's happening. I implore you to purchase verifiable, ethically sourced goods. Don't be just another piece of shit human being. It is all that can be done. It is a simple gesture that, if done in mass, could lead one day to better lives, lives worth living, for millions of people, millions of children and future children worldwide. Every action you take in life, no matter how large or small, will have an effect on the world around you and the future itself. What kind of future are you comfortable with creating? I'm Keith Plah, host of this channel, The People's Pigeon. As always, thank you for your time, and I hope to see you again soon. Until next time, be well, and be kind to one another. Upstream, are you with me?